Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Scott Svonkin. He is the Vice President of the Los Angeles Community College District, and the district is taking a very strong position again on what some would say is a somewhat controversial issue, and that's the question of e-cigarettes. I have to tell you, intuitively, I thought e-cigarettes were a good thing, but I guess maybe not so much.
Well, it depends on who you talk to. Most health experts say that e-cigarettes can be helpful to people that are trying to quit, but a lot of people in the marketing behind e-cigarettes is kind of insidious.
Explain.
Well, the companies are flavoring it, and so people are what they call vaping, and they're sucking on nicotine, and the nicotine is being released into the air around them, and they're flavoring it with bubblegum flavor and cotton candy, which makes me believe that the companies producing these want to market to children.
But at the same time, when you see someone smoking an e-cigarette, what comes off the cigarette and out of their breath, forgive me, is not the same as the smoke of tobacco. It doesn't appear, at least, to be harmful. I mean, it doesn't smell really. It's like vapor. It's water, no?
Well, that vapor contains carcinogens, and according to Dr. Jonathan Fielding and other medical experts in Los Angeles, not only is the nicotine bad for you because you're breathing in nicotine.
So there's secondhand nicotine.
Secondhand nicotine.
Okay.
Well, and if you watch the cigarettes, there's the nicotine, and there's some release just in the air.
Yes.
In addition to whatever they breathe out.
Okay.
And so it is not healthy if you're not used to nicotine to be breathing in nicotine.
It can cause you some jitters and stuff.
Yes.
But there's no tar, presumably.
I'm not
I understand.
a
I'm pushing you, right, fair
I'm
enough.
not a scientist, but the fact is in classrooms at the community colleges, students were vaping.
Okay, so let's get to the point. So vaping means smoking?
It means smoking the e-cigarettes. They would inhale, they would process this liquid that includes nicotine and other substances that they put in to flavor it. And
in class
and on campus, walking around the campus. And so what we've done is unanimously, we voted to essentially ban vaping or e-cigarettes the same way we banned smoking on virtually all parts of campus. A few of the campuses that are very large have designated smoking areas.
Okay.
But other than those designated smoking areas, there's no smoking or vaping on our campus.
So you're treating it as if it's a cigarette?
Exactly the same, because the fact is people use them as if they're cigarettes. And the results are they're sucking in nicotine, which if you do it to quit, it may be a good thing for you.
Right.
But if many people just do it.
But is your concern for the smoker or for those around the smoker?
I'm more concerned about people like myself who have asthma, possibly compromised immune systems. I'm more concerned about students on our campus having to breathe in secondhand smoke or secondhand vapor.
Okay, so what's the response been?
So far, it was unanimous. There's been a number of media outlets that have covered it, and I've heard nothing.
Really?
Yeah.
No complaints
No
from
complaints.
the student body, no
No.
complaints from the e-cigarette manufacturers? Because when e-cigarettes hit, it seemed like this may be the beginning of a way to decrease tobacco.
Right. Well, initially, I think that was the big thing is you use e-cigarettes to stop smoking. The thing that they're doing now is with the flavor and trying to make them more enticing, it is now becoming the new smoking. And so I've received no phone calls. We had one person speak against requiring e-cigarette smokers to be around tobacco because some people doing e-cigarettes want to quit.
Right.
And they had a good point. They wanted a separate designated area. But unfortunately, we want to discourage smoking on our campuses. We want to discourage vaping on our campuses. And look, I went through a firestorm when we banned guns on our campus.
Oh, yes, you did.
And from one coast to the other, people complained. So far, I've had no complaints. Now, we're just implementing it. It just went into effect. So maybe the next time I visit you, there'll be more people complaining. But I think for the most part, they just need to understand that smokers and people that vape don't have the rights that supersede the other people around them.
Well, hopefully they won't be complaining to you, but the new chancellor.
I hope not.
You have a new chancellor.
We do.
His name is Francisco Rodriguez. Tell us all about the new chancellor. He comes from Miracosta Community College in North San Diego County.
He is a statewide leader. He has been in community colleges in California California. He's worked both up and down the state. He is an educator. He is a great guy. We did a national search and we found the best candidate in the nation to help lead one of the most complex, the largest, and one of the most difficult districts to lead, because having 9 campuses and 9 communities across this great city of LA and the county of Los Angeles,
Right.
It is incredibly difficult.
So what is his mission statement now? It's not as if LACCD has had challenges like Cuesta or San Francisco City
Thank God.
or others, but I do think there's got to be, with new blood, there's a new mission. So what are you hoping he can achieve as a new chancellor of this great district?
Well, I think we have some great opportunities. The state's beginning to give us more money. Thanks to the voters of California, we got money from Prop 30. Now there's money for job training. And so I want us to become, with Dr. Rodriguez's help and my leadership on the board and my colleagues, we want to be the #1 job training entity in all of Southern California. We want to become the place where people go to if they want a career in just about everything. And so we're putting a huge emphasis on career tech, on the trades, everything that we do. And he believes in giving people a second chance. He comes from a district that's similar, but smaller than LACCD. And I think, after having spent hours with him, I interviewed him personally, privately, for 2 hours before I was sold, to make sure that he was the right person for this job. And I believe he is the right guy to lead Los Angeles.
At the same time, you mentioned the voters were kind by passing Prop 30,
Yes.
but the cuts that the community college district saw in the last 5-6 years were just draconian and
Yes.
dramatic. And while there has been some restoration of funding, it's not to the extent that K-12 is seeing the restoration of funding. So where does Dr. Rodriguez and the board go from here?
Well, I think together we now have a statewide leader in education in Dr. Rodriguez. And so between the elected leaders and the chancellor, we have a chance now to go meet with the governor and lobby him to restore all of our funding. Over the next couple of years of Dr. Rodriguez's leadership and hopefully my continued service on the college board, we will get fully funded back to where we were 5 years ago, when LACCD was the largest, and we were still the largest, but that's just in California because everybody shrunk. We need to regrow. We need classes so that students aren't turned away. The idea that community colleges turn away students sickens me.
Is that ending?
We're doing better. It's not going to end for a couple of years, but we are increasing classes. And as I shared with you on a visit previously, we are having summer school at every single campus. And we didn't have summer school at the majority of the campuses last year. And so my hope is with Dr. Rodriguez's help, we will fully fund summer school, we'll fully fund career technical education so that people who want jobs can come to us and get a new job, because life cycle of careers has changed over our life, and now people will have 3, maybe 4 different careers, and community college is the place to do that.
And you mentioned careers, and I think we've spoken about the consideration by some that community colleges in California, at least some of them, would offer some form of bachelor degree.
Yes, and in fact, at our last meeting, we voted on a 4-3 vote to support legislation to do that.
4-3.
4-3.
Where were you?
I was on the winning side. We believe, the majority of the board believes, that giving an opportunity in certain select areas, like nursing and some other areas, it would be good for Los Angeles to be able to offer bachelor's degrees.
A little surprising the vote was 4-3, if I may say.
You know, it's interesting. Some of the members of our board that are lifelong educators believe that the mission should be narrow. And I believe that there are careers and opportunities that the UCs and the CSUs can't graduate enough people in certain careers, and we can. We do better than the UCs and CSUs in technology and in nursing and in culinary arts, automotive. We do better, and so if we can raise the level of our students, I think that's a good thing.
He's Scott Svonkin. He is Vice President of the Los Angeles Community College District. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter California Edition.
Which country is the largest manufacturer of e-cigarettes? China, India, the United States, or Venezuela? China is the largest manufacturer of e-cigarettes in the world.
It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Chen. He is a member of the Hacienda La Puente Unified School District. But a few things before we talk about the district. Congratulations, sir. You were recently named to receive a Marshall Memorial Fellowship. What does that mean?
Well, it means I'll be joining a delegation of 25 Americans. We'll be visiting 5 different cities in Europe.
Where?
We don't know
Do
yet.
you know? Okay.
We don't know yet, but it'll be 5 different countries. And it's basically a way to introduce young American leaders who don't have much experience with Europe with European counterparts.
And you were not selected because you're an elected official per se. There are some elected officials who may get selected, but that's not a requirement of the fellowship.
No, absolutely not. Elected officials are actually a small minority of those who are selected. And it runs the gamut of people in business, in government, not as elected officials.
Sure.
But elected officials really don't comprise a large part.
So the trip is 25 days?
25 days.
This is remarkable. When?
It'll be for me in April to May.
How did this happen?
It's something that I had heard about, and I've had a lot of experience traveling in Asia, living and working in Latin America, but Europe is not a region that I'm very familiar with, and I can't think of a better way to experience it than through this kind of fellowship.
I think it's an understatement when you say you've traveled a lot in Asia. I happen to know you were in Taiwan recently. I had been there as well. But much more importantly, you are quite the American yourself. You are a member of the Navy Reserves.
That's right.
And you recently were sent to Korea to engage in war games. To the extent you can tell us about what you did, we'd love to hear about it.
Sure. So I'm a member of the Navy Reserves, and as a reservist, you do a weekend, a month of training, and then 2 weeks of training a year.
Sure.
So this was my annual training.
Got it.
And I was part of Operation Key Resolve in South Korea.
What can you tell us? As much as you can, I want to hear.
Well, I think it goes without saying, everyone knows what the tension is on the Korean Peninsula.
Of course.
It's North Korea.
Right.
And it's very, very unstable. So South Korea is one of our staunchest allies in the world, not just in Asia. And we have a very large presence in South Korea, primarily Army, but also Navy. And every year we do 2 exercises with our South Korean counterparts just to game out what might happen if things reach breaking point.
And you're an intelligence officer.
Yes.
Which means, to the extent you can say, what does that mean?
Well,
What does that mean?
Intelligence officer means, I guess you would do a lot of analysis, collecting and analyzing data.
Movements, whatever it may be. So, from a view up high, how was the trip for you?
It was great. It was my first time as part of a military exercise. And my first time in Korea. And it was just great to see how closely we were working with the South Koreans. I mean, we were really, really partners in that environment.
So you're of Taiwanese descent.
Yes.
Now you've been to Korea. I've been to Taiwan, but not Korea. Tell us a bit. How different are they? How similar are they?
They're very similar in that they are metropolises.
Yes.
Seoul is a huge city.
Right, as is Taipei.
And as is Taipei, but Seoul is on a magnitude even larger.
Really? Okay.
And their subway system is just so extensive and complex, but the English words they use is so small, I got lost every single time.
Right, because you speak Chinese, Mandarin, but not Korean, presumably.
Don't speak any Korean.
Okay, I want to shift gears and talk about your position right now with the Hacienda La Puente School Board. Recently, the school board, as other entities are doing, are trying to open up the process, create more transparency. Tell us about the initiative.
So one of the initiatives that we put forward is called OpenGov. We joined the OpenGov platform, and that means we're placing all of our budget information, our financials, online, and it's in a very easy to use and understand format. A lot of graphs, a lot of charts. So any person can just go online and see where we're spending our money.
Was this done as a result of what we'll call the Bell scandal and what the California Controller John Chung did by trying to create some more transparency?
It was definitely motivated in part by everything that's been happening with Bell and all of that. And we are the first school district actually in California to adopt this platform. A lot of cities are doing it. So as you know, Bell and other cities are grappling with this, but I thought we'd get ahead of the curve and actually, make our district the first.
And do you have a sense as to how it's been received?
People are very excited about it, especially our employees as well. When we go through negotiations for salaries, et cetera, very often sticking points is, well, how much money do you have and where are you spending it?
So it will be clear.
It's crystal
What's the
clear.
website? Do you know offhand?
I don't have the
I'll put it on the screen.
put on the screen. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. I want to also talk about how the school district is doing generally as a microcosm for school districts statewide. We know that the years have been very, very tough.
Right.
But we do know that Prop 30 passed. We also know the economy's turned around a bit.
Right.
We know revenues are up. How is that playing out in a school district of your size, which actually is fairly large?
Yes. So, we've been very conservative with our money for the last 6-7 years. We've given out a couple of raises, but we've really had to hold back. This year, we feel that we can start investing again into our infrastructure, as well as better compensating our teachers for what they're doing. So it's definitely had an impact.
There has been a move by members of the legislature on the Democratic side
Right.
to create what's known as TK, transitional kindergarten,
Right.
pre-kindergarten. They really seem to be putting their weight behind it. It's part of their proposed initiative for the year. The governor has issued his proposed budget. That initiative was not in his proposed budget. As we speak today, we don't know what will happen with the move towards transitional kindergarten. I want to get a sense from you, as a soon-to-be father, if I may say, what do you make of the move to create an entire new year of school? I mean, this is not a voluntary,
Right.
or would it be voluntary? Do we know? Or would it be mandatory? Because when is school voluntary or
Well,
mandatory?
I think it would become mandatory.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the whole point, is to provide more schooling,
Right.
which as an expectant father, I think it's a great thing. And when you take a look at the United States compared to Taiwan,
Sure.
Korea, other countries we've mentioned, in terms of total number of hours we spend in a classroom per year, it really pales in
It
comparison.
does. But let's go back though and talk about this specific initiative, TK. And in the background, remind our viewers that the age with which a child could start kindergarten has been pushed so children are starting kindergarten later. You have to be older to start. So this, in some part, was a response to that.
Right.
But it is now the time to start a new program. Yes, things are going well, but if it rolls out completely, it will cost about $1 billion a year. That's a nice chunk of change.
Yeah, I think the conversation needs to begin now. And as you've mentioned, the governor has not included it in his budget.
Right.
And so if we can start talking about it now, maybe in 2-3 years down the line, we will actually have transitional kindergarten. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's needed.
I also want to talk about the way we're funding, which has changed dramatically. We've discussed this many times before. It's known as the local control funding formula.
Right.
And as part of the local control funding formula, districts are required to speak with their stakeholders
Right.
and get a sense. It's called the LCAP, I guess, the Local Control Accountability Panel. Did I say that correctly? And I want to get a sense from you. Have you started those meetings with your stakeholders? And most importantly, what are they saying to you?
Yes, so the LCAP mandates that we reach out to not just the teachers, but also to parents
Right.
and get buy-in. So our district, months and months ago, began the process of holding these town hall meetings where we get feedback from parents and from teachers about where they think the funding should go to.
What are they saying?
A lot of them are saying our facilities need
Really?
improvement. Yeah.
Is it? I mean, is that your perception as well? Are they 70s?
They are
bonanzas?
70s.
Are
Yeah,
they
they were built in the 70s, and one of the reasons why we lose students to other districts is because when you walk onto one of our campuses, you will know it's from the 70s.
Interesting.
And people want the bells and whistles. They want the big screens where you can have the interactive.
Can you spend
whiteboards.
funds on facilities as part of LCFF? I mean, I know you have a lot of discretion.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's all part of the learning process.
Right.
So, for example, computer labs.
Sure.
That's something that directly impacts the student's education. And we've opened up new computer labs at almost all of our schools. We did it ahead of schedule. And that's directly related to this feedback.
But as part of LCFF, you're getting additional funding for targeted children.
Right.
English language learners, foster kids, economically disadvantaged.
Right.
How do you make sure that money flows to them? Or can you make the argument if you open a computer lab, it flows to them and everyone?
Well, so we can definitely make that argument because our school district is over 50-60% free and reduced lunch. So once we open up something
hear
in
you.
one school, we know it's impacting those students.
His name is Chen. He is a member of the Hacienda La Puente School Board. My name is Brad Pomerance, and this is Charter California Edition. Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by John Graves. He is the author of this book, Fracking, America's Alternative Energy Revolution. There is no doubt, sir, that for some people, fracking is a four-letter word. For others, they believe it is the future of energy independence in the state of California and the United States of America. Talk to us in the most basic level, what is fracking?
Brad, first of all, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. Fracking is the process of extracting oil or natural gas from the deep rock beneath our feet. It's done by a combination of running a tube down into the ground between 1 mile and 4 miles in depth, and then turning it horizontally and running it out another mile to 10 miles. And then through a process of running what's literally a gun down into that hole, a gun that fires bullets out of the side of the gun rather than the barrel of the gun. Those bullets hit the rock, open them up. They do that in stages, 50-foot stages at a time, pull that out, and then force water and sand and some chemicals down into those fractures and force open those fractures so that they become thousands of miles of capillaries through which the natural gas or the petroleum can then flow uphole into receivers.
And let's talk about California. In California, there's something known as the Monterey Shale, where a lot of fracking could potentially take place.
Yes.
Tell us about the Monterey Shale and what we think is in the Monterey Shale.
Monterey Shale contains as much as 45 billion barrels of oil. That's the second largest oil deposit on the planet, second only to one of the two fields in Saudi Arabia. So it's a massive field. The challenge with the field is because we live in California, we live in a very young, geologically speaking, land structure. So the earth beneath that is broken into intervals. There's no continuity to the reservoirs. So and when you hydraulically fracture, you're going to run a horizontal line. You've got to make that line run through a continuity of deposits. You can't really do that very well in California. So that's the first challenge, geological. The second challenge is the physics. How do you design a pipe that can do this rather than this? Well, in fact, they have those, but that's the second challenge. The third challenge is really the opera one, if we're going to develop Monterey, and that's the legal and regulatory challenges.
That would be a huge challenge. I want to talk about that. But first, I'm looking at some products here. Does fracking have anything to do with any of these products?
Well, let's have fun with fracking. What do you think, Brad?
Please.
Let me ask you a trick question. These are products and containers that all have something in common. And my question to you is which, if any of these, have nothing to do with hydraulic fracturing?
I think none of them have to do with hydraulic fracturing.
Congratulations, you're a wise interviewer. As a matter of fact, you're absolutely right. Nothing here everything here is related to fracking.
Exactly. No, I purposely did that. That's the point, is that everything here
Right.
has to do with hydraulic fracturing. Explain why, how.
Well, for example, duct tape, WD-40, are directly result from the hydraulic fracturing of petroleum. Vaseline, of course, chapstick, my wife's lipstick.
Right.
All the gumminess from that is a paraffin. It comes from the distillation of petroleum into a variety of fuels, aviation fuel, gasoline, diesel, et cetera, as well as paraffin.
So, like you said, all these products at some level have been impacted, have used the product, the result of fracking, hydraulic fracturing. You mentioned regulation. We know that Governor Brown in California recently signed what's known as SB4,
SB4,
which some have called the toughest fracturing bill in the nation. Yet there still is a lot of contention surrounding fracking. We know recently at the California Democratic Party convention, the delegates came out against fracturing, even though their Democratic governor is in support of at least looking at the issue. The city of Los Angeles is looking to put a moratorium on fracturing. Carson. Has put a moratorium on fracturing for Carson, which has a huge oil field. What's happening, sir? Why is there such pandemonium surrounding fracking when, as I understand it, fracking has gone on in California for 50 years?
Do you have children?
I do have 2 daughters.
And do they ever worry at night when they go to bed about the monster under the bed?
They do.
That's the story of fracking. From the point of view of those folks who are against it, it is a bugaboo.
And let's talk
monster.
about, they're bugaboos.
Irrespective of the facts.
Right. I mean, the parade of horribles is pretty dramatic. Pungent smells, water contamination, cancer-causing chemicals, earthquakes, methane. The opponents, and I'm a neutral journalist, but the opponents really, trot out this parade of horribles. So let's talk, for example, about earthquakes.
Okay.
Okay, we recently had an earthquake here in the Los Angeles basin. There was a rumor that earthquakes were the cause of, that fracking was the cause of some earthquakes. I think it was in Ohio. An eastern Ohio fracking site was shut down in March. Youngstown is shut down. There's been a spike, allegedly, of earthquakes in areas with fracking. What do you make of
Oklahoma and Ohio.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you make of that?
Let's deal with facts, because to me it's more about facts than fear. I don't represent the industry, I'm simply an author.
Okay.
The facts are this. When you hydraulically fracture, you use water. When you have recycled that water enough times, you can no longer use it. You have to do something with it. What it's done with it is that it's put down into what are called injection wells. Injection well is an old well that can no longer produce. When water is put down into that injection well, it stays downhole. And if that injection well also happens to be in the vicinity of fracture zones, then that's going to cause microquakes. That's what's happening in Ohio. That's what's happening significantly in Oklahoma.
So is that of concern?
It is of so much concern to the industry that for the last 18 months they have been using the same technology, the seismics that they use to discover oil and gas, using the same technology to discover where fracture zones are, so that they no longer use those injection well sites. Yes, it's a serious concern, and they're trying to respond proactively rather than reactively to that issue.
Please.
With regards to California, fracturing does not cause earthquakes. It is the injection wells indirectly that causes earthquakes. Fracturing has nothing to do with.
Let's talk about chemicals. That is also a cause of concern. And what we know is that as part of SB4, there is discussion about chemicals and the disclosure of chemicals that will be used in fracking, but then there's this exemption for trade secrets. And that's what's caused a lot of that bugaboo that you've mentioned. Well, if you're not going to reveal what chemicals you're using, what are you hiding? And so why should we let you do this? You're putting carcinogens in our ground.
Two observations. Number one, the chemicals that go downhole. I've been to sites, I've worked with guys who do and gals who do this. The chemicals are typically less than 1% of the total volume, the 6 to 8 million gallons of water that goes downhole. Almost all of that is sand. Most of the rest is guar, which goes into chewing gum and ice cream. It's what gives continuity to lipstick and chapstick. The chemicals that do go down, some of them are in fact carcinogenic. That is correct, in significant concentrations. But these concentrations are less than 1,000th of 1%. And they are basically bactericides and fungicides to kill the little critters that live downhole before they come up here. Number two is the fact that there's a website that the industry and the regulators have developed to basically say this is what we're using in each of these holes around the country. And more drillers, E&P and exploration and production guys are subscribing to that and simply saying, here, this is what we put downhole. Please, look at it.
Because it seems to me as a
Trade secrets has become a misnomer.
Yeah, but as a neutral observer, it does seem to me that is creating a straw man.
True.
The opponents can use it.
True.
And so the industry doesn't seem to be serving itself well
True.
by refusing to reveal. If it's less than 1%, what's the trade secret?
And frankly, you've hit on the true weak spot of the industry. The industry simply, for whatever reason, refuses to discuss the facts and circumstances of what they do. They're much more concerned about, well, we're not going to talk to those guys. We're just going to do what we do and do it well. That's their problem, and they need to overcome that fear or ignorance of dealing with the people who are objectionable.
In 10 years, do you think that we will see fracking in the United States to such an extent that we will be less dependent on foreign oil?
Yes, significantly less dependent upon foreign outside of North America. That is correct.
Okay. His name is John Graves. He is the author of this book, Fracking: America's Alternative Energy Revolution. My name is Brad Pomerance. I want to thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.